Unitarian Universalist. I am your worship associate, Emma Caverly, and it is a joy to be with you today. Community Church is a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in the quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email for announcements. We do have one announcement from Alicia, who is also our wonderful speaker today.
Hey everyone. So you may not know it, but we actually have an Instagram account. And I would say it's new because we came up with the idea of getting one, and then we realized we had one since 2018 and had just forgotten to be posting to it. So if you are on Instagram, you can follow us. We are CCUU NOLA. And if you ever have pictures of anything that is happening with CCUU members, please send them along. I think we'll work to get there's a photo submission form and we can get it sent out to you. In the meantime, if you just want to email me photos that you have, I can pass them along to Valentine, who is running the account. So again, CCUU NOLA. Find us on Instagram and please like our stuff because we need more followers.
I just want to remind everyone, especially you watching, that we're having a new to CCUU class or gathering May the 19th after church. We usually have something to munch on, and it's required for membership, but if you take the class, it is not required that you join. So if you're just curious, or if you're an old-timer that would like a refresher course on how things work around here, then we'd love to have you.
And this morning we welcome back to the pulpit our member, Alicia Cooke, with a message about the Anthropocene. Please join me in our land acknowledgement, which can be found on the back of your order of service. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade route on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as the Grappling. Tribes that have lived on this land include Caddo, Natchez, Choctaw, Chickamauga, Homa, the Tunica, the Lusky, Alicia, among others. We recognize that as a result of growing trees and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. Alicia will give us our opening words.
So our opening words come from Linda France. Her poem is called Climate Change Bedecked in Ocean Plastic Visits Her Therapist. I am too big. I lumber. My synthetic bones polypropylene flesh. My sinews of twine and net. Spores of my toxic breath. For all my bulk, I'm doomed to keep floating. Can't go deep and can't rise up. My eyes, dark with the sadness of seals, ache with my own redundancy. This endless cacophony of bottles and lids, the indignity of nappies and striped straws. Because I am everything anyone has ever thrown away. I am nothing. An accident, innocent. The abused becomes the abuser. But my polystyrene heart isn't in it. Like any child, I want to grow up, go my own way. I long to be free. No, I don't want to stay on the surface of things. I want to dive among corals or walk in woodland, unencumbered, jump, climb trees, forage for mushrooms. What I really need is to be seen and met with love. Wouldn't that help me change? Even change shadow boxes with change. I'm craving the chance to shift shape and be kin. Know kindness. Share all I remember about water with the people who made me. Please, can I touch you?
It is our custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join us in singing the words of our chalice lighting. We light this flame. The words are printed in your order of service.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This morning I'm going to share some words with you. This is called God's Other Ways, and the author is unknown. There once was a man who had 4 young sons. He wanted to teach each of them about the dangers of judging things too rapidly before seeing all aspects of a situation. So, he decided to send each of them on a journey, one after the other, to view and observe a distant pear tree. Each son traveled in a different season. The first in winter, the second in spring, the third son in summer, and the fourth in the fall. At the end of the year, he brought his children together and asked them about what they had seen and observed. The son who traveled in the winter described a gnarled, twisted, barren tree that stood stark and ugly against the land. The son who went in the spring disagreed completely. He commented that the tree seemed full of hope and promise, with many green buds along its branches. The third son, who traveled in the summer, described the pear tree he had seen as covered with beautiful blossoms that looked and smelled divine. Finally, the fourth son and last son, who made the journey in the fall, was even more elated. He described a tree laden with sweet, delicious pears that tasted better than any that he had eaten before. After each son had spoken, the father said they are actually all correct, because each had only seen but one season in the pear tree's life. He told his son that it is foolish and impossible to make wise and fair judgments in this manner. He further explained that the essence of something, whether it's a tree or their fellow man, can only be measured as a whole at the end of a year, having seen it in all of its development and fullness. To make a negative judgment in winter is to miss the promise of spring, the beauty of summer, and the delicious fruit of fall. The moral of the story: refuse to judge yourself, life, or other people based upon a single mistake or a challenging time. Refuse to let the pain of one season destroy the joy of what is to come in the future. The end. So please join with me, and we have some little young people today, so help me join them out of going to Army. Thank you so much.
Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you are online, you may write your joys and sorrows in the comment section to be read aloud. In person, you may write them on one of the cards being passed out by our greeters. Please remain seated as we sing our hymn, number 15, The Lone Wild Bird. That's hymn 15, 1-5. Michelle, sending healing energy to Lizzie Kay's daughter, Annabelle, who broke her arm on Friday. From Happy Cinco de Mayo, Viva la Mexico. Mexico. From Jacqueline, a sorrow that Liz, Wilma, and Esther aren't able to be in worship with us this morning. From Jim, a sadness that in the face of enormous suffering of innocents, war and violence continue. And also a joy from Jim, a joy to see so many at Jazz Fest enjoying the music and culture of New Orleans. We will light 2 more candles, one for the joys still bubbling up, too new to share, and one for the sorrows that we cannot yet put into words. Know that we hold you in our hearts. Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members in friend generosity help us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at ccuurolla.org/stewardship or by text at 504-370-2659, text GIVE, and you can give in person this morning, which someone will come around the basket. Please join, or you may remain seated for our hymn, number 174, "O Earth You Are Surpassing Fair," that's 174.
So this reading comes from Grading Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which Jacqueline mentioned a couple weeks ago, and which I'm sure a lot of us have read, and I'm sure about 200 Unitarian services have been written around. But this is her legend retold of Sky Woman Calling. She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below, But in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled towards them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath with the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather. Loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he surfaced with nothing to show. One by one, the other animals offered to help: otter, beaver, sturgeon. But the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned grasping for air with their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst, and before long a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. The turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hand across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from the dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made. Not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with her deep gratitude. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that animals too had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. You may remain seated for our next hymn. It is in your small teal hymnal. It is 1069. So this next reading is adapted by Alicia Cooke. It's a book about climate grief, how to face the mess we're in without going crazy, by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. But I want to preface it by saying it's based on an exercise I do with my students, where we take the whole kind of timeline of the world and condense it down to a 24-hour day. The world is 4.5 billion years old, which is insanely old. If you were to take that as a 24-hour day, starting with the Big Bang at midnight, humans do not enter the planet, enter our story, until the last 5 seconds of the day. So I will read the second half of this exercise, which is then taking that 5 seconds, so the last like 300,000 years or so, and then condensing that down into a 24-hour day. So if the history of humans was a 24-hour day, if the history of humans was a 24-hour day, humans do not migrate out of Africa until 6 p.m. We live in small groups as hunter-gatherers. At 10:50 p.m., we develop agriculture for the first time. At 10:55 p.m., the first recorded city, Jericho, is established. At 11:20 p.m., we discover and begin using the wheel. We also start the earliest forms of writing. At 11:30 p.m., there are cities in Egypt, China, Peru, Iran, the Indus Valley, and the Aegean. At 11:45 p.m., Jesus is born. At 11:57 p.m., Christopher Columbus reaches North America. At 11:58 p.m., the industrial age begins. Humans use fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas to power machines for factories, transportation, light, heating, etc. And if the history of humans was a 24-hour day, from 11:59 p.m. and 40 seconds until midnight, the last 20 seconds of the day, we have used up more resources and fuel than in all of human history before this time. That was wonderful. It is early May, and we New Orleanians know this is a very precious time because in just about a month, our world will be almost unfathomably hot. But right now, the mornings are still cool, the heat of the day is still bearable, the wind is still lively and pleasant, and there's still some scented jasmine, sweet olive. And if you're the sort of person who is able to live in the moment, you can and should allow yourself a moment of pure joy, to take it in without the larger context of the absolute climate chaos that we are in. I teach 9th grade geography, and in the beginning of the year, after we'd worked out our north from our south and our latitude from our longitude, I try to ground our upcoming exploration of world cultures in the concept of the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene refers to a proposed geological epoch that some say we are in, one which is characterized by the presence and influence of humans being evident in the fossil record tens of thousands of years from now. In other words, it's some sort of biological proof that humans are permanently and on a large scale altering this planet where we live. For those who subscribe to the concept of the Anthropocene, there is considerable debate about when it begins. Some say it began 200 years ago during the Industrial Revolution, when fossil fuels were first burned on a large scale, releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Others say it began with nuclear bomb testing in the 1950s, and more recently, others have proposed that it dates from the first presence of microplastics in, well, just about everything, as it turns out, including in us. And still others argue that even the idea of searching for the Anthropocene is less evidence of our influence and more of our own vanity. That humans, a species that has been around for just 0.007% of our planet's history, could never leave such a mark as to be visible hundreds of thousands of years from now. And that may well be the case. I hope it is. But even if not settled as a scientific concept, the symbolism of the Anthropocene idea is useful for understanding our world. It can be distilled into this. We have changed things on this planet and changed things greatly, and not for the better. And we may very well not come back from that. I don't enjoy dwelling on our impact any more than I'm sure you do, so I'll just get through this next part quickly. By the end of the century, we might be seeing daily temperature highs of fully 10 degrees above the highs seen at the end of the 20th century. By this time, we can also see up to 8 feet of sea level rise on average, with some communities, such as those on the Gulf of Mexico, experiencing the fastest rise. By century's end, our global flood plains can increase by 45%. As we are already learning, even a single foot of sea level rise damages critical infrastructure, such as roads, sewage treatment plants, and power plants. For each degree Celsius of global warming, we can expect to see a 7% increase in precipitation during extreme storms. Category 4 and 5 hurricanes will become more common. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, and in 15 years could be completely ice-free in the summer. As the polar ice sheets melt, the surrounding ocean absorbs more heat, which in turn speeds up the warming process even more and also contributes to ocean acidification and in turn to the devastation of global ecosystems. Pests, pathogens, and invasive species thrive in disrupted ecosystems in ways we are still not always able to predict. We've lost 85% of our wetlands since the 1700s, to the detriment of the species who depend on them. Overall, climate change is considered a major factor in accelerating a 6th mass extinction for our planet, with over 42,000 species at risk of being wiped out. And as for humans, climate change will be the cause of approximately 250,000 annual deaths by about 2030. Wars over water rights are likely to become more common, and an unprecedented global climate refugee crisis is likely to facilitate the rise of far-right extremism and exacerbate income inequality. Globally, more than 1 billion people could be displaced by rising seas and other impacts of climate change. Driving all this is the fact that, as we heard in the last reading, humans have used more of the planet's resources in the last 20 seconds of our great cosmic day than in the 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds before that. Put into real terms, what that means is that we have used more resources, including burning fossil fuels, since 1950 than in all of the nearly 300,000 years of our species' history prior to that. So does it make you feel powerful to know what we have done with the 5 seconds that we've been on this planet? So when I bring this information up with my 9th graders, this is the point where at least a few of them will say, well, that's it, I'm moving to Mars. They want to leave Earth for Mars for the same reason that many of them want to leave New Orleans as soon as they grow up. It's because they're only 14 years old, they're still pretty new to this world, and there's enough disturbing things happening around them that they naturally think there's got to be something better than this. And so for me and my colleagues, who are arguably the older and wiser ones, part of our job is to help them understand, no, trust me, this place, this city, this planet, it's pretty damn great. You're not going to find anything else that compares to this. So do not give up on her just yet. If the litany of apocalyptic woes that I shared hurts your heart, maybe it is at least a small comfort to reflect a little on how we got here. The great acceleration in the burning of fossil fuels began during the Industrial Revolution, which was not just a time for factories. It was also a time for leaps forward in transportation and sanitation and medicine. Before we started burning gas and automobiles, the manure, the dust that came with horses in cities was a major public health concern. Cars were actually seen as a game changer for our lungs, for our air, and the overall cleanliness of our cities. The petrochemical industry has also given us plastics, and plastics, for all their faults, also comprise syringes, stents, catheters, insulin pens, pacemakers, and other life-saving devices. With all these resources we have scraped from the earth, we have cured diseases, responded quickly to emergencies, connected with our loved ones, and so much more. And when you're in the midst of innovation, it feels like progress. It doesn't feel like a betrayal of the land. So our human greed, our constant desire for more, may be the biggest part of our Anthropocene story, but I want you to remember that around the edges of that story is also love. I believe that throughout history, the vast majority of us have just tried to do right by our own conscience and to act on behalf of our loved ones in the name of a better life. I think that was true 100,000 years ago, and I think it was true during the Industrial Revolution, and I think it's true now. So let's not blame our ancestors for trying to build a better life for themselves and for us. And that brings me to one of the most unpopular opinions I hold. I love humans. We really do. We are creative and passionate and hilarious. Sometimes we're even intelligent. And I love this world. And as I tell my students who are trying to jump in a spaceship with Elon Musk, I want to stay in this world. And I want them to stay. And I want you to stay. What I don't want to do, and what I don't think I have the energy to keep doing is, as Mary Oliver says, walk on my knees through the desert for 100 miles repenting. I believe that the shame of knowing the incredible destruction wrought by the cumulative actions of humans over time has propelled us into grief and inaction and forgetfulness of the wonderful things we humans are capable of. Earlier this morning, I shared with you the myth of Sky Woman as told by the Potawatomi botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer in the opening pages of her amazing work, Raising Sweetgrass. According to the story passed down by the indigenous groups of the Great Lakes region, Sky Woman fell from the heavens into a new world, our world, where she was completely at the mercy of its creatures in order to survive. Kimmerer lets us know that, quote, like any good guest, Sky Woman did not come empty-handed. She brought with her the elements needed to turn the world from brown to green, and nuts and seeds to return the favor to those creatures who had helped her. She was welcome on this earth. She lived up to her welcome. But we are creatures of this planet like any other. And like Sky Woman before us, we belong here. And this is my second unpopular opinion of the day, I believe we are welcome here. In fact, I believe our natural state is one of welcome. After she shares the Sky Woman myth, Kimmerer goes on to lament the conversation she once had with her undergraduate students, where she asked them to think of examples of positive interactions between people and the land. And so enmeshed as they were in the age of the Anthropocene, they just couldn't do it. She writes, as the land becomes impoverished, so too does the scope of their vision. Take a moment to check in with yourself and with the scope of your own vision of what humans can do to bring healing to this land. Do you think healing is possible? The shame of our past mistakes can paralyze us. It can make us feel like we are no longer welcome, that we have broken the contract we've made with this earth to care for her, and that she would be better off if we weren't around to mess things up any more than we already have. So should we all just go to Mars? Kimmerer often speaks of the original instructions which the Anishinaabe Creator God gave to all humans in the very beginning to be passed down. The original instructions are not commandments like the ones received by Moses. They are prescriptions for behaving responsibly on this planet and as part of the community. A call to listen to plants and animals and the air and the water and the rocks, listening for what to harvest and when and how much, or the names and natures of Earth's creatures, how to use them, how to honor them. The original instructions cannot be separated from the land because they involve listening deeply to the land. The land is the instructor. This is clearly not something we've done effectively in the Anthropocene. As our thirst for new lands and resources to exploit has grown, and as our world has become increasingly globalized, more and more people are displaced or displace themselves from their ancestral lands. And numerous modern inventions such as refrigeration and air conditioning and high-speed travel have tricked us into thinking we don't actually depend on the land. In many senses, we are a long way from home. Says Kimmerer, after all these generations since Columbus, some of the wisest of native elders still puzzle over people who came to our shores. They look at the toll on the land and say, the problem with these people is that they don't have 2 feet on the shore. One is still in the boat. They don't seem to know whether they're staying or not. The same observation is heard from some contemporary scholars who see in the social pathologies and relentless materialist culture the fruit of homelessness, of a rootless past. America has been called the home of second chances. For the sake of the peoples and the land, the urgent work may be to set aside the ways of the colonist and become indigenous to place. Kimmerer recognizes the way that colonization devastates both the colonized and the colonizers. For the descendants of the colonizers, for example, of which I am one, we no longer know what it means to be indigenous to place. But Kimmerer reminds us that Sky Woman herself was an immigrant to our world. And as such, the invitation to be indigenous to place, to listen for and follow the wisdom of the original instructions, has been extended to all since the very beginning. And at the same time as the climate changes, old truths about our land often no longer hold. The land simply does not behave the same as it did 1,000 years ago, 100, or even 5 years ago. What I like about the indigenous wisdom of the original instructions as shared by Kimmerer is that they are rooted in a deep sense of presence. It's much more than old stories about what to plant and when. It's paying attention to the land beneath you at this moment, wherever you are and wherever you're from, asking it questions and listening carefully for answers. In the Anthropocene, the nature of each generation's tasks to complete are therefore different, yet the original instructions remain the same. Kimmerer, who is a botanist, was once asked by a group of indigenous basket makers to explore why sweetgrass was disappearing from some of its historical range, and whether different methods of harvesting might point to the cause. She and her graduate student, Lori, pressed on with the research despite a complete lack of enthusiasm from her university, where the dean had told them, of course, when you harvest something, it damages the population. There's nothing to study. In other words, humans get in the way, humans destroy. But Kimmerer and Lori carefully surveyed local sweetgrass populations and compared those areas which are harvested for basket making with the areas left untouched by humans. Eventually, they came to a clear conclusion. The grass from the harvested areas thrived, while the grass from the untouched areas withered. Says Kimmerer, Lori's findings might have been surprising to academic ecologists, but were consistent with the theory voiced by our ancestors. If we use a plant respectfully, it will stay with us and flourish. If we ignore it, it will go away. In the Anthropocene, it is stories like this which sustain me. Dare to believe that the earth still loves you, and perhaps in a small way needs you. In my partner's yard in Mississippi last summer, I hacked the smothering grapevine from a canopy of pine and magnolia trees until I was covered in blisters and rashes. After learning that the vine can kill these trees by blocking their light source, I also learned that the mature trees, which the grapevine targets, are the ones most effective at combating climate change. And that's what my quest to save save a few of our prettier trees was doing. When it got too hot to pull vines, as it very quickly did, I looked for other ways to serve the land's needs. We kept the small pond filled with a trickle of water from a nearby well to provide refuge to wildlife in the summer months. And we set up a trail cam, which showed that that was happening. So foxes, turtles, coyotes, raccoons, armadillos, and the neighbor's dog all partook of this water source that would not have existed without us. From the trail cam, we began to learn which animals to expect and when. Without grapevine, our trees flourished, and with water, the animals came. We loved the land, and then eventually it started loving us back. It's just 1 yard. We're not going to reverse climate change with just 1 yard. And these may sound like personal solutions to a systemic problem, and in a way, they are. But these exercises and paying attention to the original instructions are also about healing the relationship you have with the land around you. Maybe even finding a meaningful relationship with the land for the first time. Regaining something that at some point in your long lineage was lost to your ancestors. And if you take joy from these experiences, perhaps that is proof that the land loves you back. We are mourning a planet which is very much changed, but which is also very much still here. Do not let premature grief or shame blind you to the joy of a beautiful day, which even in the Anthropocene are plentiful. Do not let it divert you from your path home to indigeneity, a path back to us once again feeling welcome here, in the only home we've ever known. You can be brave, and you can face the hard truths of living in the Anthropocene. And you can turn around and face the path that you walked, and that your ancestors walked before you. And you can extend to them your grace and forgiveness for what we have all collectively done. And you can extend the same to yourself. And with humility, and courage, and optimism, you can walk back until you are home again. So welcome back. Bless you. Wow. Benediction I've used before, but it's been maybe 6 or 7 years for my first ever sermon at CCUU. This is an untitled poem from Gregory Ward. This is what was bequeathed us. The earth, the beloved left, and leaving, left to us. No other world but this one. Willows and the river and the factory with its black smokestacks. No other shore, only this bank on which the living gather. No meaning but what we find here, and no purpose but what we make. That and the beloved's clear instructions. Turn me into song, sing me awake. So now you may rise, embodied in spirit, to sing hymn number 82. 82. Thank you. And the first and second.
Please join us for refreshments and conversation in the fellowship hall.
Oh,